Good evening. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District's April meeting. Today is Thursday, April 22nd. It's a little after 6:30 p.m. and we'll go ahead and open our virtual board meeting. To begin the meeting, I'd ask Ms. Galeazzi to note the attendance, and while she does that, I will note that Director Hinojos Presi is excused from tonight's meeting. And with that done, we'll go ahead to the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will go ahead and lead us in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll turn the time over to General Manager Pollack for our safety moment.
Great, thank you. So the safety moment is to remember that while it does appear that COVID is moving away from us, we still need to maintain the 3 W's of washing your hands, wearing your mask, and watching your distance. And we all know that everyone over the age of 16 is now eligible for the vaccine here in the state of Oregon. So if you have not already been vaccinated, I would highly encourage you to consider that to not only protect yourself, but to protect others as well. And that concludes my safety message.
Thank you, General Manager. We do not have any announcements or changes to the agenda. I will, however, note that we did receive public testimony from Mr. Cam. I wanted to acknowledge receipt, and Mr. Cam, thank you for your comments. With that, we'll go along to the consent. Oh, and I should note that his comments will be entered into the record officially in the packet. Next up is the consent calendar. So if there's no issues with the items in the consent calendar, could someone please make a motion to approve them? Director Krebs.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar.
We have a motion.
Charles Richards, I second.
Okay, I think Director Carney beat you to the punch, Director Richards. So we have a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion on the motion to approve the consent calendar, Ms. Galeazzi, could you call the roll?
Director Wynn?
Aye.
Director Bush?
Aye.
Director Carney?
Aye.
President Davidson?
Aye.
Director Krebs?
Aye.
Director Richards?
Aye.
So you have 6 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Next, we'll go on to the action items, the first of which is the approval of a contract for the purchase of zero-emission buses.
Thank you. I'd ask Greg Thompson, Maintenance Manager, to come on the screen.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. Tonight, I will be asking the board to authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 5 40-foot battery electric buses to replace 5 35-foot diesel buses in an amount not to exceed $3,597,775. I kind of wanted to add before I go into the formal process that just to note that if this is approved tonight, this is a major milestone for Cherriots in their history, and as an organization is committed to being an environmental leader, an innovator in making a positive difference in enhancing community livability through innovative, sustainable transportation options. And it's also Earth Day, so what a great day to do this. Yeah. Yay! So it is an exciting time for us. There's been a lot of work done, and hopefully this is approved tonight. So the current Cherriots local fleet consists of 64 35 and 40-foot buses. 34 of those buses are powered by renewable natural gas. The remaining 30 are powered by B20 biodiesel. Regular replacement of these vehicles ensures a safe, efficient delivery of the service In accordance with the district's transit asset management plan and state of good repair planning, SAMPD staff is committed to ensuring our vehicles are replaced at a schedule consistent with industry best practices. The 5 biodiesel vehicles scheduled to be replaced are approaching 14 years of age and average 545,000 miles, at which time, by the time of replacement, they'll far exceed the FTA recommended useful life benchmark of 12 years or 500,000 miles. The 5 battery electric buses are funded from our successful 2020 Low-No Emission Vehicle Program Award using 5339C funds. This grant is unique in that it allows the naming of a transit partner in the grant application. This satisfies the competitive procurement requirements. Prior to submitting the grant application, manufacturers of electric buses were researched. Information was obtained regarding successful deployments, delivery times, parts availability, charging support, and vehicle reliability. Independent cost evaluations were successfully completed, and we named Gillig as the bus building partner for Cherriots. Gillig offers superior support for their buses and have had success in battery electric deployments in various parts of the country already. Partnering with Gillig also ensures consistency among the current Cherriots local fleet. And additionally, Gillig has partnered exclusively with Cummins for the electrification and propulsion of their buses. In early 2019, Cummins deployed electric propulsion in the United States, and prior to that, they had deployments in the Europe market. To remain competitive in that grant process, and to also increase our local match amount, which kept us more competitive, SAMTD Cherriots will be leasing the batteries for these 5 buses. So the cost per bus tonight that I'm asking for does not cover the batteries. Batteries are not included. The financial impact, funding for the proposed contract will be included in the capital projects budget of our adopted fiscal year 22 budget. And the vehicle costs are listed in your table 1 below, which are $719,555 per bus for a total of $3,597,775. The match amount for that is also in table 2 using the 5339 Low-No grant, a 75% grant to a 25% match that will be funding that match with various grants and general fund. It is the staff's recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 5 40-foot electric buses to replace 5 35-foot diesel buses for an amount not to exceed $3,597,775. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Manager Thompson? Director Bush?
Yes, this is monumental. But my question is, Mr. Thompson, do we happen to know what the timeline would be for the construction and final delivery for these?
So what Gillig says is from the time that they have a purchase order in their hand that they're looking at 12 to 14 months. For the contract purposes, we're putting in 14 months, which would be July of 2022. And once we have that production spot held, then we'll start working backwards. We want to make sure that the charging infrastructure and those things are in place before the batteries arrive. Right now, we've got several steps still in this battery electric bus process, one being charger selection. That's what we're working on now. So charger selection, construction, installation, and then the battery lease. So those are kind of our steps to be done before 14 months is up.
So then a follow-up with that, if I may. You have to come to us for each one of those steps to move on. Now it's time for this, now it's time for that, or is this all together?
Now this what I'm asking for tonight is just for the purchase of the buses. All of the other phases will exceed the threshold that will require board approval, so you'll be seeing me often.
Thank you.
Here.
For the record, Manager Thompson, it's always a delight to see you. So it's not a bad thing if we see you often.
Okay.
Other questions for him? All right, I've got a couple. I know we applied for another round of 5339C Lono grant buses. Could you give me a timeline on when we might expect a response on that grant application?
The expected response time, we're hoping to have a response by July of this year.
Okay, great.
And now that'll drive some decisions, but if we're successful, fingers crossed, that may drive some changes to further have innovations in our electric modeling for these 5. But those are all be determined on if we're successful with this, we're calling the second round.
Great, okay. And if we're so lucky as to be awarded in that second round, would we be able to maybe keep our line in the queue with Gillig, but just expand it? Or would it be a second order and then maybe we get 5 buses this time and 5 3 months later?
Well, we have a very good working relationship with Gillig, and we will hold the 5 spots in production as soon as we have a PO. Gillig is able to hold 5 additional production spots, so for 10 total until we hear if we're successful in the second grant. So yes, if we are successful, all 10 buses could be built together.
Great, that's fantastic. My other question is, so I noticed that we're replacing 35-foot diesel buses with 40-foot battery electric. Could you maybe help me understand what that might mean, those extra 5 feet?
Increased ridership is directly what it relates to. We've been, and Mr. Trimble might be able to help me a little bit with this, but we've been working on having consistency in the fleet, down to some operator training on how to maneuver some of the tighter spots. There's always going to be a need for some percentage of the 35-foot buses in our routes just by the nature of the area that we serve. But we're looking to have the capacity for increased ridership and have some consistency in our fleet.
Is it safe to assume that the 40-foot electric vehicle has a similar interior capacity to a 40-foot, fossil fuel power vehicle, or are the batteries somehow obstructing the actual size of the cabin?
Actually, they don't interfere with cabin size at all. It varies very similar, and the bus drives very similar to our CNG buses with the weight distribution and where the batteries are located.
Great.
So I think it's going to be a really good transition for us, easy transition.
Good. Deputy General Manager Trimble, would you like to chime in?
No, Mr. President. I think Greg answered it very well. And really, the quick and dirty answer is we don't want to build in any capacity constraints. So we do get a little bit more capacity with the 40, which is why we were just made that decision.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is, so once we get delivery, assuming, at least the known knowns that we know that 5 battery electric buses are coming, that'll put our fleet at 34 renewable natural gas and then 25 B20s and then 5 BEVs, battery
Exactly.
electrics. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Manager Thompson? Director Bush.
Thank you. Manager Thompson, so the buses are longer. Does that create any more driving difficulties in our scenario that I know we're using mostly on Lancaster? We have to worry about tight spaces. Are they still going to be able to get in there?
Yeah, Red 11 was selected for several reasons, but as far as the drivability of a 40-foot bus on that service, it's very easily doable, and that's what we use now.
Great, thank you. If there's no other questions, would someone like to make a motion? Director Nguyen.
Thank you, President Davidson. I move the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 5 40-foot battery electric buses to replace 5 35-foot diesel buses for an amount not to exceed $3,597,775.
We have a Director Bush with the second. Thank you. Any discussion on the issue? I would just like to say Happy Earth Day, as Manager Thompson
Yeah.
said. This is fantastic. Great timing. I don't know if you planned that, but well done.
We've been waiting for months to make this happen on this. We're just kidding.
Oh, we haven't.
Yes.
I would not put it past him.
Okay, seeing that there's no further discussion, Ms. Galeazzi, could you call the roll?
Hey, Director Bush,
Aye, for sure.
Director Carney,
Aye.
President Davidson,
Aye.
Director Krebs,
Aye.
Director Richards,
Aye.
Director Nguyen.
Aye.
Hey, you have 6 yay votes and 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Galeazzi. We'll move on to our next action item, which is the acceptance of the Title VI analysis.
Great, thank you. And so to present the staff report is Ted Stonecliffe. There he is. Ted?
Good evening, President Davidson and members of the board. Tonight we bring 2 Title VI equity analyses to you for your acceptance. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people from discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. The Federal Transit Administration and Cherriots' own Title VI program, updated in May 2020, both require equity analyses to be performed in certain circumstances to protect historically underserved communities. As explained in the board memo on page 17 of your packet, the FTA exempted transit agencies from performing formal equity analyses prior to making service changes or fare changes during the declared emergency of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, since 2 of our changes have lasted beyond the limits that define them as permanent changes, we had to perform equity analyses and are presenting them to you now for consideration. So the first one, as you are aware, all fare collections ceased on March 19th, 2020 in order to keep our transit operators safe. This was also due to the declared emergency, which called for drastic measures to keep operators and riders safe. Month and day passes utilize mag stripe technology, which have to be swiped at the fare box for validation. The fare boxes were made unavailable to most riders since front door boarding would only be allowed for those who requested the ADA ramp. Cash was considered a hazard due to the belief of it transferring germs and viruses. Closing of public spaces where fares were being sold meant that fare cards were not as available to riders. As explained in attachment A, removing fares equally across services did not pose any disparate impacts to minorities or disproportionate burdens to the low-income populations who use Cherriots services, because no individuals, groups, or any other kind of riders have been treated differently than others in this process. The second equity analysis we're bringing you tonight, it was performed for the removal of Route 22, our Civic Center Loop service. This stopped running in March 2020 due to the closure of the stop adjacent to the Salem Public Library due to construction activities. The route is a redundant service that has been proved to be unnecessary, as shown on pages 22 through 38 of your packet. Per Cherriots Policy 707, major service changes, removal of a route is considered changing more than 15% of the route and is thus considered a major service change. This requires an equity analysis to ensure no disparate impacts to minority groups or disproportionate burdens to low-income populations in the route service area. As shown on page 30 of your packet, Table 1 shows that all of the impacts are below the thresholds established in the Cherriots Title VI program. Furthermore, a public hearing is not required since all of the bus stops proposed for removal are within 1/4 mile of other bus stops served by transit routes with equal or greater frequency. Therefore, no adverse effects are found in relation to Title VI populations, and the service is recommended for permanent removal. At this time, staff recommends that the board accept the Title VI equity analyses regarding fare-free operations and Route 22 removal, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Stonecliffe. Are there any questions for him? Director Bush.
Thank you, President Davidson. Mr. Stonecliffe, I just want to verify that most of the, if not all of the stops that 22 is not going to be serving, do they already have other buses using those stops, providing service there?
Yes, so the stops that are being removed are within 1/4 mile of other stops in the system already. It doesn't mean that the stops being removed will be served by other buses. Specifically on Church Street, for example, there is no service on Church Street between Mission and Ferry, and therefore people wanting to ride the bus at those stops would just need to walk a little bit further to stops that are within 1/4 mile. And does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Ted, you're muted. Okay, I want to, Mr. Stonecliffe, if you could confirm that when you say removed, you just mean out of use, right? We haven't like started ripping up concrete, right?
So yeah, that's correct. The stops would remain if that's what you mean. The physical infrastructure will remain in the ground. We will just remove the service from the route. The route has been discontinued for over 12 months now and will remain so.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, Route 22, even whatever a post-COVID world looks like, probably will not return.
That's correct. Our intention is, because it is a redundant service, it's completely replaced by our other services. And that's what this analysis shows, that there's no disparate impact to minorities or low-income populations, and therefore removing the service is acceptable within our Title VI program.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciated the analysis in particular on the commercial and Liberty Streets. I believe it's Route 19 where you noted that the frequency of that is 15-minute headways, and whereas the Route 22 is only half an hour. So it's not only providing redundant service, but it's actually slower redundant service. Not slower, but less frequent. And so other than that, what I think is a 2-block section on Church between Mission and Ferry, I mean, yeah. I appreciate the effort that you all went to conduct this analysis, and I think it's sound. I'm very happy to see that we're not impacting an underserved community by the removal of this, and perhaps we might be able to reallocate resources to better serve some of those communities at a later date.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, the service hours that have been used for Route 22 in the past would be reallocated to Route 13, and it gives us the opportunity to serve some areas of Northeast Salem that are historically underserved communities with direct service to downtown, which does not exist today.
So is it safe to assume that this change feeds into our next action item, one of which is some of the changes to Route 13 and the changes of time of departure? Or is that a separate issue? No, separate issue, okay.
Separate issue, but
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Stonecliffe? Director Bush.
Thank you. Mr. Stonecliffe, again, this is about the fares. I know we have to accept an equity analysis about the fares. Does that mean we're going to continue no fares, or we're just accepting the fact that we've not had them for so long? Does that make sense?
The formal acceptance of this analysis for the removal of fares is needed to complete our Title VI equity analysis that is submitted with each update every 3 years of our Title VI program. So it's an FTA requirement that if a fare change is lasting more than 6 months, then it is considered permanent, and we need to document that equity analysis. And so that's the reality of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's just basically we're stating this is what we've done for 6 months, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. So we need to make sure we're showing the impact on our possibly underserved communities. Yes?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no questions, would someone like to make the motion? Director Krebs.
President Davidson, I move that the board accept the Title VI equity analysis regarding fare-free operations and Route 22 removal as shown in Attachment A.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Director Carney with the second, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion. Ms. Galeazzi, could you please call the roll?
Okay, Director Carney,
Aye.
President Davidson,
Aye.
Director Krebs,
Aye.
Director Richards, Director Richards,
Aye.
Director Wynn,
Aye.
Director Bush.
Aye.
All right. 6 yes and 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Galeazzi. We'll proceed to our next agenda item, which is the approval of lease extensions with route match for tablets. That's a rough one.
Thank you. I'll ask Chip Coley, our Manager of Information Technology, to present the report.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. The matter that I bring before you this evening is a contract renewal or funding of a contract renewal for our tablet lease for tablets that are used on the regional and paratransit buses. asks that they, whether the board can authorize the general manager to execute a one-year contract extension of the Route Match tablet lease for use on the Cherriots Regional and Paratransit services in an amount not to exceed $50,000. The Cherriots Regional and Paratransit services, which are operated by MV Transportation, they use a software program called Route Match, which is actually now owned by Uber. Each vehicle has a mobile data tablet that utilizes an application to log driver time, mileage, and use navigation maps, and a manifest for daily operations or daily service. These tablets are not owned by the district, but rather they are leased as part of a contract with Route Match. When the lease was renewed in fiscal year 19, the district had expected to have completed the identification and implementation of a replacement solution before the 3-year term was up, and hence the contract with Route Match was architected in such a way to allow for an early termination. However, since the tablet lease is still active and the devices are still in use, the total cost of the contract will soon exceed the $100,000 threshold, and we are required by policy to take it to the board for approval per fiscal policy 413.03K and 414.03C. In an effort to continue with using this tool, the district needs funding authorization to maintain this lease for one more 12-month period. Funding for this contract is included in the annual operations budget for SAMTD's adopted fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022 budget. And the overall cost is split between all services operated by MV Contractor MV Transportation, which includes 5307, 5310, and 5311 funds. The staff recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to execute a one-year extension for the Route Match tablet lease for the use on Cherriots Regional and Paratransit Services vehicles in an amount not to exceed $50,000. I'm prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Manager Colby. Any questions for him?
I have a question.
Director Bush?
Yes, sir. Yes, Director Bush.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Colby and Mr. Davidson. I was wondering what the actual use of these tablets are. Is this their dispatch information, et cetera?
Yes, ma'am. The information that they receive from those is their manifest, so their work order for the day. But it's also used, they also use it to log their time. So they log into the tablet when they began a run, they log out when they're done with the run, and that's how we track how much is paid to MV Transportation for those services. It also has a mapping service that when it works, it helps them route to the correct location where they're going to pick up passengers.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Manager Colby, at the end of this 12-month extension, do you anticipate doing a competitive process to, okay, great.
Yes, President Davidson, our intention is to solicit for a replacement demand response solution.
Okay, and I assume there's a fairly robust market if Uber has entered the scene.
There is indeed a very robust market.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, would someone like to make the motion?
I will.
Please.
I move the board authorize the general manager to execute a one-year extension of the Route Match tablet lease for use on the Cherriots Regional and Paratransit Services vehicles in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Director Krebs.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion. Ms. Galeazzi, could you please call the roll?
President Davidson,
Aye.
Director Krebs,
Aye.
Director Richards,
Aye.
Director Nguyen,
Aye.
Director Bush,
Aye.
Director Carney.
Aye.
6 pass and 1 absent.
Great, thank you. So that concludes our action items for this evening. Manager Colby, thank you very much. Next, we'll proceed to our informational reports, and we only have one for this evening, which is the May service change briefing.
Yes, thank you all. I'd ask Chris French, our Service Planning Manager, to present the briefing.
Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. I'm here this evening to provide the May service change update. It's very exciting to kind of get back into some normalcy of regular service changes. And with this, we are bringing back our later evening service that we have not had for a year now. So I'm very excited. So extending our later evening service that was funded with STIF funds to the 11 o'clock last pulse out of downtown. Along with that change, we've made some minor changes to other routes, Route 7 and 12. We've adjusted the end of the line to provide more clarity for passengers, how the routes worked. There was confusion, and we thought that we could clear some of that up by making some slight adjustments as to where the end of the route was and where it started to come back inbound. The Route 13, the adjustments to that are, as we were looking at our schedule and with it being linked to the 22 in the past, we had to have two spaces at the transit center, and the Route 3 and the 13 shared the same spot, and then the 22 was a separate spot. With us being able to separate the 3 and the 13, we can allow them after 7 p.m. to pulse on the hour and the half hour. Prior to this, the 13 pulsed at quarter till and quarter after, and it does that through the regular part of the day, but in the evenings, it was the only bus that was there during those times. So if you came in on that bus, you had a half hour wait at least in order to transfer to any other route in the system. The Route 19, we have added an additional trip from Kaiser Transit Center because the bus, we've tried to make consistency with in the evening that people have a full round trip. And so that one ended at Kaiser Transit Center previously, and we've added that trip to downtown for consistency. For the local service Saturday, we've made the same adjustment to the Route 7 with the change with the end of the line. And that is the major changes for the local system. For the regional system, the only change that really is taking place is we're able to add a stop in Mill City on 3rd and Alder, which has been a long requested location in Mill City. It's next to a community center that does lots of services for the community and the canyon as a whole. And so with adding the stop, it allows us to provide access to that community center for people in the canyon. And with that completes my update, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Manager French? Director Bush.
Thank you, President Davidson. Mr. French, that's really exciting about the stop up in Mill City because of all that community, the communities in the canyon have gone through, having this extra boost to help them stay connected and do it easier is going to be very helpful for them. So that's great news.
Thank you. We're very excited to be able to provide that stop.
Manager French, on a related note, is that a replacement or in addition to the existing stop in Mill City, the Ivy and First?
President Davidson, that is a additional stop. So currently there is only one stop in Mill City, and it's actually on the Lynn County side. So we're actually putting a stop on the Marion County side in Mill City.
Great, thank you. And then, if you'll entertain me, I have a in the weeds question that is maybe ancillary to your presentation tonight. But with the Route 3 and Route 13, they of course follow Summer Street at the same, for at least a portion, and then they split off in different directions, right? And I'm wondering if, given that they're on 15-minute headways, or I guess what I'm actually asking for is an explanation for why this can't happen. If it can't, is if there would be a way to sync up the 3 and 13 to allow for where during that section of Summer Street, there's effectively 8 minutes headways as opposed to 15-minute headways, because they're heading in the same direction to the same destination, at least along that portion of the respective routes.
President Davidson, with the removal of the Route 22, that is one of the benefits that will come. So they will be more synced up. The Route 13 was tied to the 22, so it would come downtown, and it had basically a 15-minute loop to do the Route 22 to serve the 3 stops that we have not been serving. And with doing that, that allows us to synchronize during the 15-minute service part of the day to actually have 15-minute service on that corridor. So that's one of that is a benefit or a effect of removing the 22. It allows us to synchronize those routes on the inbound better.
Perhaps I'm misremembering. Was the Route 13 a 30-minute headway?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
so
okay.
They're both 30-minute headways, but it was 15 minutes of
right.
the time was tied to the Route 22. So the 13, it took less time. It takes less time than the 3. That's getting complicated. But in order for it to pulse and for it to do the Route 22, it was offset. So outbound, when they left the transit center, they were 15-minute headways going outbound on Capitol. Coming inbound, because it had that 15-minute loop on the end of it, they were offset, and so we couldn't line them up. But with the situation as it is now, we will be able to make that adjustment and have them be synced for 15-minute service on both Capitol and Summer.
Great. Thank you very much. As somebody who, at least in the before times, worked along Summer, I often took the 3 and 13 downtown, so thank you. Other questions for Manager French? Okay. Thank you very much. Very exciting. Looking forward to the May 2nd service change.
And the next one coming back in September will be even more exciting.
Yes.
So, thank you all.
Thanks. Okay. So with that, we'll move along to the general manager's report.
Thank you. I just have a couple items to report. First, I have a couple of introductions. So if I could ask Denise to turn on her camera. There she is. I'd like to introduce our new Director of Finance, CFO, Denise LaRue. Been on 3, or is this your 4th week?
This is my 4th.
4th week, and we're very happy to have her. She's been doing a great job of learning our process. She comes from the YMCA of the Columbia, Columbia, up in Portland. How's that? So Denise, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I have very much enjoyed being here so far. I'm learning a considerable amount from everyone around, and I really look forward to working with all of you.
And she's putting together this little thing we call the budget.
Yeah, what a time to join the board or join Team Cherriots. Thank you for your efforts around that.
And I'll talk about the budget in just a minute. Thank you, Denise. And I know Ben was on the line earlier, if he's still there, he is. So this is the second time today I've put him on the spot. Earlier today I had my general manager roundtable and introduce him cold. So introduce Ben Sawyer, who is our new contracted services manager, who's replacing Sue Ann Coffin, who retired a couple of weeks ago. So Ben, welcome.
Thank you very much, and I too am very excited to be here and look forward to being able to work with everyone to help propel us into the future.
Great, thanks, Ben. Yeah, Ben brings extensive contracted services experience from the private side, and so and he comes down from the Portland TriMet First Transit contract, so we're excited to have him on board. Thanks, Ben. And so I did mention budget earlier, so as you all know, budget process starts, well, it's already started, but the first budget meeting is May 6th, just a couple of weeks away. You will have your budget books the end of next week, and we will begin the process. And just a reminder, because it will be a virtual budget committee process, and we'll go from 7 pictures on the screen to 14, so it will be a little different than normal, and we will present the budget, proposed budget, a little bit differently, looking at it from a fund and services perspective and what the budget will provide as far as services, as opposed to some of the detail that we're getting into, which I think it'll make it more impactful for what you're being asked to consider. So look for that information coming soon, and be ready for the first, maybe only meeting on May 6th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, General Manager Pollock. We'll proceed now to the board member committee reports. And as usual, we'll go through the sub-districts one by one. Director Nguyen.
Great, thank you, President Davidson. And before we get into the busyness of budget cycle, I do want to appreciate the fact that my colleagues were able to create a brave space for me to share my vulnerabilities, as well as shared your own, and find a place of common humanity to share. I really appreciate that. As an update to the DEI subcommittee work, we began our DEI consulting services RFP by interviewing 3 firms back on March 27th. We had a meeting to do scoring on April 2nd, and we were able to narrow the list of 3 down to 2. We will be moving into deliberations to decide on the one that we ultimately will be pursuing the project with on approximately April 26th. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe
Monday.
Mr. Naus is on the call.
Yes, Monday.
And that is all I have to report.
Thank you, Director Nguyen. Director Bush.
Thank you, President Davidson. This past month has been different in that the first 2 weeks our family had to be in quarantine due to exposure to COVID, and that changed some of the ways that things were operated around here. And it was, we are all fine, and we're back into operation and moving along. I did attend Coffee with Kathy the Saturday after our last board meeting. We had about an hour virtual, and then we were able to go to in person. And that was the last in person for like a couple of weeks from that point. But we were at Molly and Maddie's in Kaiser, and I talked about our transit operators and maintenance workers day and our transit heroes, and about being a transportation to vaccination site, and our bus being used at the Northwest Human Services. I shared about the Salem to Albany feasibility study, the work being done to prepare for the South Salem Transit Center and their upcoming service changes. Many thanks to Patricia Feeney for helping me work through information selections. Other news came from the Kaiser Chamber, Kaiser Fire District, and the City of Kaiser, because this is a coffee that Mayor Clark hosts. We talked about Kaiser First Citizen recipients, which was Kim Freeman, and some heroes at the Kaiser Fire District, of one which was the Great Water Rescue by a team of Kaiser firefighters, as shown in their annual report. was a grandfather who had had a heart attack, and they were able to get to him on the boat and perform CPR on the way to the hospital. And he was able to leave the hospital a few days later. So great job, Kaiser Fire District. I attended several virtually chamber meetings with Woodburn, Salem, and Kaiser. And another meeting of note was Salem for Refugees, and an event in Bangladesh. There was a fire where over 35,000 people ended up becoming homeless because of that. And that is going to affect the city of Salem and our services to our community, because Salem is now a certified partner with World Relief, establishes them as a permanent site for refugee settlement. So that will bring more benefits to the city and task the area with new responsibilities as we potentially welcome more new neighbors in our area. So that will affect our service. I attended the Public Transportation Advisory Committee virtually, and where they talked about the STIF plan and the discretionary proposals, and they were approved to move on to the next step. They did do a few adjustments with that. Going through one exciting class was the cybersecurity class that the special districts and SDIS prepared, and for all of our districts to make sure that we are monitoring our systems, that each person using their computer knows how to detect a phishing, possible phishing email, etc. And that opened my eyes in many areas in that regard. I was able to attend in person the Gutser Neighborhood Association meeting, and they talked about the Kaiser's sidewalk connectivity project. They're trying to get input from all the neighborhood associations as where we need to connect certain sidewalks, and that's in regards to safe routes to school as well. So that was a very informative meeting. And then last one to talk about was Kaiser United is a group of folks from the area that get together, part of Salem Leadership Foundation, who presented the meeting there. And then there was a shout out about the Cherriots work with the Northwest Human Services, as Cherriots is donating the bus there as a vaccination and waiting site. And that's been spoken of in several of the other meetings I attended. So, and one last thing, the Monster Cookie Ride is back on August 29. That'll be hosted by Salem Bicycle Club, coordinated by former Cherriots board member Hirsch Sangster. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Carney and your assistant.
No, not data. Thank you, President Davidson. I will keep my report brief this evening. So our SCATS policy meeting is not until next week this month. The Our Salem project has resumed with weekly meetings from noon to 1:30 and 5:30 to 7:30 every Wednesday. Yesterday was it's very difficult for me to attend things after work without prior notice due to the 4 small children living in my home with me. But the noon to 1:30 meeting would ordinarily be available to me. Also news for this group, my job rotation with the Department of Human Services ended early, and I was called back to the Department of Land Conservation and Development for what they identified as an urgent business need to help them with some pending legislation that is coming through in the land use space in the legislative session that's ongoing right now. So with that transition, I think I will need to be more mindful as a board member about any conflicts of interest that might be created through the climate work that DLCD is doing, that I can avoid or not avoid being involved in and the input that I give. So I will take that up with you, President Davidson, and with Alan in a separate conversation. But that has been a lot of transition in hardware and calendars and everything else in the last few weeks. But we're looking forward to things settling down. And my assistant didn't fall out of a stroller on the patio this evening, but his sister did. So I'll excuse myself as soon as the meeting is over to go check on her. Can you say night night? Say bye bye. You say bye bye. Bye bye. No, not on cue. Maybe next time. Thank you. End of report.
Thank you, Director Carney. Next up is me. So as Director Bush mentioned, Cherriots has been providing a bus to Northwest Human Services out in Monmouth. And so the team there, they sent us a thank you card, which I wanted to read for everyone's benefit. It's addressed to Cherriots leadership team and board. They say, "We would like to extend a sincere thank you to you all for your willingness to partner with us in a very unique way to bring COVID vaccines to our Monmouth area clients and community. This would not be happening without your generous support. Thank you." And it's signed by their leadership team there. So kudos to Cherriots staff that have made that happen, and I think it's just wonderful that we're able to be those kind of partners to these, especially in a time of need like now with vaccines. On that note, I have been vaccinated and want to say that it is the greatest thing since sliced bread. If you, like me, are a person of faith, you can think of it as a miracle, and I would urge you to please go out and get vaccinated. If you're not a person of faith, it is certainly a scientific marvel, and regardless, I would urge everyone that is able to get vaccinated. Yesterday was Administrative Professionals Day, and I wanted to take a moment to thank Linda Galeazzi for all of the work that she does for our board. She is that the voice of God that tunes in periodically in all of our board meetings doing the roll call votes and makes sure that we're all on top of things. Speaking just personally, I could not do this without you, Linda, so thank you. Thank you very much for all of your efforts, both visible and invisible. Also wanted to speak to a recognition award that we'll be doing for some Cherriots staff. So as everyone knows, the COVID-19 pandemic crisis has been a severe impact throughout the world, and including here in the Mid-Willamette Valley region. Since the pandemic began, we had members of Team Cherriots working on the front lines. They've been, in no small part, a lifeblood in making sure that the region could continue to operate the way that it needed to throughout this difficult time. There have been those that were not only on the front lines, but also those behind the scenes, making sure that those on the front lines could get everything done. And so on behalf of the board of directors and the entire organization, we want to say that we recognize you, we thank you, and we celebrate you. And tomorrow we will do just that. Our appreciation for our frontline and essential workers is sincere and heartfelt, and we wanted to show this gratitude with a special monetary recognition award that will be presented tomorrow morning to those frontline staff. And so more details to come for those that will receive that award, but I just wanted to say publicly here, thank you to all of Cherriots staff. You have undertaken a Herculean task and you have done it admirably, and I just can't thank you enough. So on behalf of the board and the organization, thank you, and I hope that this monetary award will be a token of our appreciation. And then one last comment I wanted to make. So for this month, we did not have a Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments meeting. There is one next week. And then the Mid-Willamette Area Commission on Transportation, I believe, will have another meeting next week or next month. So I'll have more to report on those two assignments later. But seeing as it's Earth Day, I wanted to talk a little bit about climate change and then the efforts that are being done at the City of Salem level around the Climate Action Plan Task Force. So I think it's a good opportunity to remind all of us that here in Salem, in Kaiser, in Polk County, in Marion County, and then actually throughout the state of Oregon, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emission, of that particular kind of pollutant that contributes to the warming of our planet. And so in order to appropriately address climate change, we need to address the biggest issue, which is transportation. And so as we take time to celebrate Earth Day, I think it's important to consider the kind of Earth that we want, both for now and then especially for those that come after us, whether that's our children, grandchildren, or just future generations. And so in that vein, I'd like to briefly touch on the kind of future that we need as a region if we intend to do our part to ensure a stable climate. So according to the latest modeling by the City of Salem's consultant for the city's Climate Action Plan Task Force, public transit ridership will need to triple to be able to meet the lofty yet very realistic goals that the city council has identified. And so in order to do that, we, Cherriots, will need to receive significant funding increase to be able to achieve that. And so I believe that this is a all hands on deck kind of challenge. When we're talking about a biosphere and certainly climate, this is certainly an all hands on deck kind of thing. And so with that in mind, I'm looking forward to working with all of our partners, both peer governments as well as private enterprise, to ensuring that in this particular sector of our emissions in transportation, that we, the local public transit provider, receives the support that we need to be able to offer the services that are needed. So that has maybe been a little too focused on minutia, and I think it's helpful to kind of paint a picture. And so in that vein, I want to describe what I think that could be the not too distant future. And so in this near future that I'm envisioning, you don't have to bother looking up the timetables for public transit because the frequency is so frequent. The frequency of the buses is so frequent that you don't even need to consult a timetable because you just step outside and go to the bus stop. It is a future where those just minute away buses can connect you with the whole region, as well as within the urban growth boundary, and then where you have a transit card that not only allows you to ride the buses, but to borrow a bike in our robust bike share that is serving throughout the region. And if you do opt to drive, you can use that same transit card, or perhaps it might be better called as a mobility card, to pay for parking. And that same card can then allow you to ride regional rail from down to Eugene up to Portland and connect to those services there. So in short, if you don't want a car, you don't need a car. This is in my mind, a question of freedom and opportunity, and it's a chance that should be and can be extended to all of the residents in our region. And so I think the key thing here is that this is all within reach. Not only is this achievable, but the result is something that is desirable. We will wind up with a delightfully livable community. And so that's the future I'm really looking forward to. And on this Earth Day, thank you for indulging me as I kind of described what I hope can be our future and is the future that I'm working towards, and I believe that we all are working towards. So with that, I conclude my report, and we'll now turn it over to Director Krebs.
Oh, thank you, President Davidson. I don't have too much to report today. One of the things I'd like to say is I do miss the personal interaction that we used to have at the meetings and before the meetings and so forth. It's also at the various committee meetings. I go to a lot of meetings on Zoom and so forth, but it isn't the same as meeting people in person. And I miss this, and hopefully I won't be on the board too much longer, but hopefully we'll get over this and the board will get back to having that personal interaction. I didn't attend as many meetings this month as I have in some of the previous months, but I did attend a neighborhood association meeting with the Morningside Group, and they were looking at the Fairview site out in southeast Salem that's being developed with a lot of housing, both single family and multiple family. And one of the reports that was given at this meeting indicated that the developers are putting together a funding package to improve Reed Road. And I bring this up because Reed Road is a very narrow, dangerous road right now, and we're putting hundreds of living units out there that have to use that facility. But also, our Route 6 bus now makes a big detour going clear out beyond I-5 to come back to southeast Salem. And when Reed Road is improved, which is hopefully by the summer of 22 or maybe sooner, we can reroute that bus and cut some time off and better serve the areas that need bus service rather than running on Kubler without any stops. I also received General Manager Pollock received an email from one of our constituents asking about possibility of looking at streetcar service again to West Salem. And this is something I will bring up later, but it's kind of an exciting concept that I'm looking forward to pursuing in the future. I have signed up to go to the next OMPOC meeting, and for our listening audience, that's the Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium, and that will be held on Friday morning of April 29th. And with that, that's my report.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Director Richards?
Well, I've had a busy month as well, and I want to say, first of all, I got my shots, and my wife did too this month, and it is a miracle. And the work that people did to help and to put it out really are great. This month, I had two basic things I've been working on. I am, of course, on the board for Northwest Senior Services, and we've been working with legislation coming into the Capitol. Of course, it's not the same when you can't go out and actually go in and meet these people face to face, but we've been working hard to do that, and we've worked hard to get people the services that they really deserve. There's a lot of times that these people really need some help. And the other thing that has made me very happy, I am an aviation freak. I love airplanes, especially World War II type airplanes. And I helped reopen the Air Museum in McMinnville. It is now open again, and I'm getting tours to people about airplanes, and it's been a really exciting time. And the last thing is, it's rose season, and I'm a rose fan, so that's what I've got to do in my spare time. I hope you all have a really wonderful summer.
Thank you, Director Richards. With that, that concludes our agenda items for this evening. Thank you very much, board members, for tuning in and participating this evening. To the members of the public that may have tuned in, thank you for participating and for tuning in. With that, we are adjourned.